Back in the day, Supercell was releasing cards like parents popping out babies in the 1950s, goddamn. Because Supercell was pumping out so many cards, they released some goofy ass shit in those days, and even today they still release abominations like the Phoenix and Monk. Today, we're gonna be looking at 7 cards that at one point were incredibly OP, either at release or due to a buff. Now there's way more than 7 of course, so if you don't see one mentioned that should've, feel free to drop it in the comments below. I do plan on making a follow-up. Anyways, with that being said, let's get right into it.
Let's do this.
Elite Barbarians. Ah yes, probably one of the most well-known buff disasters ever. The Elite Barbarians were dominating the meta for months, and boy was it hard to log on and enjoy the game when this shit was going down. However, upon release, they weren't that good. They weren't bad either, but it was mediocre for its time, especially for 6 Elixir. And Supercell noticed this and gave it a buff. And the rest, as they say, is history. The Elite Barbarians' hit points received a 19% increase, a damage increase of 14%, and a hit speed reduction of 0.1 second. To this day, scientists are still trying to figure out what the fuck Supercell was smoking. They were fast as fuck, their hits were strong, and they were damn meat shields. It seemed like any card you threw at it would get bullied by these Elite Barbarians. It was very hard to prevent them from going to your towers and shredding it. Now, of course, everything has a hard counter most of the time, but when it feels like you're being forced to bring specific cards to counter one ridiculously strong card, that's a problem. This thing could shut down your entire push. It was way too powerful and something needed to be done about it. Over a month later, the first nerf finally arrived. Hit points reduced by 4.4%, damage reduced by 4%, and their hit speed increased. But that wasn't enough because not long after they nerfed it again, decreasing their hit points by another 4% and increasing their first attack time by 0.1 second. At last, the storm had calmed for the most part. Players continue to hate it today, but it's certainly not the issue it once was. Night Witch. Available in May 26, 2017, the Night Witch was a heck of a card to deal with, and if you didn't have it, well, that sucked for you. See, the Night Witch had this unique ability of spawning bats, and these bats were very strong. The bats alone were too OP, but what about the witch? She spawned bats every 5 seconds, 2 seconds faster than the regular witch spawned her weak ass skeletons. The same range as a prince, her hits were almost as strong as my dad with a belt. And the final signature super slam move, when she was taken out, she would spawn 4 more bats. All of this combined was a recipe for disaster. The Night Witch was basically a heavy-hitting bat-spawning machine, aka COVID-19. It also didn't help that the bats and heal spell were coming out, which was only more fuel to the flames. For the next 2 weeks, everyone was getting f***ed by swarms of bats and hard-hitting witches. Unless you were the one using it. All of a sudden, Clash Royale was easy. Eventually though, the first round of nerfs would arrive. June 12th, she now spawned bats every 6 seconds. The bats spawned at def reduced to 3, and she now had a 1.5 second delay to the first round of bats spawned. But that wasn't enough, as the bats and the witch still did loads of damage. So on August 11th, her damage was reduced by 9%, range reduced, bats now spawn every 7 seconds, and she now only spawned 2 bats at death. Basically, the Night Witch had been nerfed into oblivion.
Stop! You violated the...
However, she did live on in certain decks like Golem Beatdown. Phoenix. Added in October 26, 2022, it makes it the most recent card in this list. The Phoenix was often referred to as a mega minion on steroids because for only 1 elixir more, it has very similar mechanics but much more powerful, deals death damage, and can respawn if the egg it drops is not destroyed within 4 seconds. The Phoenix was broken as hell out of the gate. It was so strong that it was not only a support card, but also a win condition and a medium-sized tank. Eventually, players figured out that if you get enough Phoenix in the field, you won the game. That's it. Just drop as many as you can, and don't forget to drop your favorite emote after you won so you feel like some kind of badass. But one of the main issues was that it did so much damage. So on the 2nd of November, 10% of its damage was taken away, and the egg's lifetime increased to 4.3 seconds. However, these changes almost seemed redundant, as if someone just slapped the Phoenix in the face with a napkin. On November 21st, the egg's hit points were decreased, and then finally, December 7th, the Phoenix hit points were reduced by 13%. In total, almost every aspect of the Phoenix was nerfed. But that wasn't enough. February 7, 2023, the Phoenix that respawned from the egg would now only do so with 80% of its original health and damage. In other words, only 80% cool bird. But that wasn't enough! No! Its death damage was reduced on the 4th of April. June 6th, the hit speed was increased by 0.1 second. And then, oh, I think that's it. Thank God, I felt like I was reading a whole page of nerfs. Anyways, to sum it up, the Phoenix got nerfed 7 times and it hasn't been a year. However, it seems like the Phoenix is finally balanced. Or is it? Nah, it is. Just leave the bird alone. Royal Giant. Released on the 29th of February 2016, the Royal Giant was actually a terrible card. Insanely poopy if you catch my drift. It was just ass for 6 elixir. For the same amount, you could have used an Expo, which was the most broken card at the time. The Royal Giant was also overshadowed by the addition of legendaries in the same update. Nobody gave a flying f about a giant with a cannon, but just a month later, everybody was given a f. The Royal Giant received a buff to his damage, increasing it by a massive 20%. All of a sudden, the Royal GG was a massive problem. If you locked onto your tower and you had no counter that was fast enough, you could say bye-bye to your tower. Okay, surely it got a nerf next, right? No, it got another buff. In the 3rd of May, his range was increased, allowing it to outrange every deployable building in the game. This meant the Royal Giant could destroy the Inferno Tower without ever being touched. And this was enough to make the Royal Giant's popularity explode. And how did you counter the Royal Giant? Well, you just uninstalled the game, it was that simple. In 2 separate occasions, it did get some nerfs. A damage reduction of 4%, increased attack time, and a longer wait for his initial attack. This was the beginning of the end for its popularity. But not only because of the nerfs, cards were also coming out that were good counters. Furthermore, in April 19th, 2017, his deployment time was doubled. This served as the final nail in the coffin. Expo. One of the very first cards to shake the meta was the Expo, which was present in the game's release. Right off the bat, it wasn't terribly OP, it was powerful and it did target air troops, but it wasn't like it was impossible to counter. However, after it was changed to target ground only on February 2nd, 2016, it was only then when the real problems began. All of a sudden, the cards you could use to distract the Expo was now a fraction of what it was before, which was good for Expo users as it was now significantly easier to lock onto a tower and absolutely melt it. Not only that, but it had a range of 13 tiles and deployed in only 3 seconds. If that Expo was deployed and you failed to realize or didn't have a hard counter, it was basically game over for your tower. Still sounds like a skill issue to me. The Expo was an absolute beast. It dealt loads of damage very quickly, and when used on defense, it held up pretty well. Because the Expo was this powerful, hard to counter, and the worst part, easy to use, players would often make fun of those using it, saying that they had no skill. Ah yes, some things never change. On February 9th, the deployment time was increased from 3 seconds to 5, so it was now easier to take care of it before it began shooting. And in March 23rd, the range was reduced from 13 tiles to 12, so it needed to be right up against that damn river to be effective. From here on out, the Expo was still an annoying card, the memes continued and everyone hated it. I mean, I still hate it, but it was certainly easier to counter now, and it wasn't as foolproof as before when using it. But goddamn, that soft launch Expo was no joke. Poison. One of the lesser talked about broken cards is the Poison, which was released on the 29th of February 2016. Now, the Poison was a pretty good card, but it's not like it got immediate attention either. In fact, it got a small buff, increasing its damage by 5% in March 23rd. So, seems like nobody was really using it. However, its popularity began to explode within a strategy called Poison, Giant, and Poison. All of a sudden, all eyes were on that damn Poison because of its crucial part in this now broken meta. What made the Poison so good is it could damage enemies and slow them down at the same time. It was very unique to the game and served as a good counter to large hordes of troops. So in the Poison meta, you would start a push with a Giant followed by a range of troops, and then when you had a solid push going, you drop the Poison on the tower or on their hard counter, and that's it. It was so easy to use. But even if your push failed to make it to the tower, that combo was extremely well at wiping out a push. So it was OP on offense and defense. Everything you threw at this damn combination of troops would get obliterated. There was no easy counter. Poison would continue to dominate the meta with no nerfs for months, unless you count that time when the Elixir Collector was now affected by the Poison's slowing effect, which literally did nothing. But on October 20th, they straight up removed its slowing effect. Just like that. Looking back at it now, card balancing back then had no chill. But yeah, that was pretty much it for the Poison at the time. It would get some buffs and whatnot, but it was no longer the problem it once was. Elixir Collector. Does anyone remember when you could defend against a hog with an elixir pump? Good times, huh? The 2016 pump was something else. Honestly, every building was, but the pump received special treatment in the form of massive nerfs. Supercell wasn't playing no games out here. The problem with the pump was that it had too much HP, and it cost 5 elixir, cheaper than most buildings at the time. So the Elixir Collector became very versatile. It generated elixir, it was cheap, it doubled as a defensive meat shield. It was a beast, and it quickly became an essential to most OP decks at the time, like Poison, Trifecta, and P.E.K.K.A. Double Prince. I definitely didn't Google those. The Elixir Collector wasn't part of the meta, it was the meta, and a lot of decks relied on it. However, like every OP card, especially buildings at the time, it would be heavily nerfed. May 3rd, the hit points were decreased by 20%. Only 2 weeks later, an additional 9% was knocked off. And on July 4th, the elixir production rate was now affected by spells like Zap, Poison, and all of that. On October 20, it got a rework. The cost was increased to 6 elixir, but the lifetime was increased by 10 seconds. However, only a month later, the lifetime was decreased, and in return, it generated elixir faster. The main issue of having too much HP and doubling as a defensive unit was now a thing of the past, and from there on out it remained a decent but not overly powerful card. So guys, that's my list of the most broken cards in Clash Royale history. As I said before, there's way more than 8. In fact, I think every card in the game has been somewhat OP to some extent, but yeah, feel free to comment below cards you think deserve a mention for a future episode. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching. Have a gaming out. Peace!